All right, good evening everyone. It's 5 o'clock, time to get down to business. It's an exciting meeting this week. I'm back from Picano. Not on time for schedule yet, but I'm working on it. We are test driving a new procedural bylaw tonight with some changes in our processes, so we'll talk about as we go through. And it is Director McDonald's last council meeting. He's been with the city or town of Collingwood for 20 years, and he will be retiring at the end of this year. And but Brian, we still expect you to answer our emails for the next 2 weeks. So with that being said, I will call council to order. Today we acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in the energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. And I will look to the Deputy Mayor for the motion to adopt the agenda, please.
Thank you. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Be it resolved that the content of the council agenda and addendum for November 25th, 2019 be adopted as presented.
Thank you, and I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Do we have any conflicts tonight, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position as we progress, let us know. Adoption of the minutes. Councillor MacLeod.
Moved by Councillor MacLeod, seconded by Councillor Madigan. Be it resolved that Council approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Council held November the 13th, 2019 as presented.
Thank you. Council, any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, then we'll move right into community announcements. I'll start with you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It is my pleasure this evening to announce what has already been well publicized, which is a good thing, that Out of the Cold has been able to establish a site that will be open for December the 2nd. And more importantly, for those who are interested, tomorrow night between 7 and 9, at their new location, which is at 250 Peel Street. This particular location is north of Hume, and many know it as a former location for E3 Community Services and an early years center. And this is fantastic news for the community, for those who are in need. The Out of the Cold task force have been working now for months, to establish a program, to hire two key individuals, to ensure volunteers are in place, etc. And I think that they're off to a really good start. So those who are interested tomorrow night in learning more about the program, the facility, where it's located, to meet the people who are driving this particular initiative, they'd love to see you. So again, 7 to 9 tomorrow, 250 Peel Street. And if I could just end on that note, personal comment, I just would like to thank the 8 members around the table who earlier this year unanimously supported to financially support this organization with seed money to get this up and off the ground. Saturday morning, I dropped my son off at the arena behind us and went for a walk, and I went down to the harbor and then made my way west. And I took 2 photos. The first photo was a photo that's been taken a million times, and that was of the terminals. And the second is a photo that I happened to stumble across, and it is of a tent located thick in the woods, and a fireplace, etc., that had been actively used probably within the last 12 to 24 hours. And it was just a reminder that this is a very real issue, and that I'm thrilled that this group of individuals have come together and will be providing comfort and security and a safe place for those who are truly in need within this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will be there tomorrow, and congratulations to all on that task force for their hard work. This has been a very hard and but very critical initiative, so it's great to see it moving forward. Councillor MacLeod.
I have nothing except an amen to what the Deputy Mayor had to say.
Councillor Conley.
Thank you. You know, that's interesting, Deputy Hall's comments, because the note I made tonight was to say thank you to so many in our community who've been organizing coat drives and clothing drives to help keep the people and our residents warm and cozy through the winter months. So to those who donate to them, thank you, and to those people who take the time to organize them, they are much appreciated by those in need. Thank you.
Councillor Madigan.
I have nothing tonight.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just because someone stopped me this week, I'm just going to make a reminder that people can find out virtually everything they need to know about what is going on in the town from the town website at collingwood.ca. And also a reminder that we have a great now implement on that website, which is the Engage Collingwood page. And there are always, or very often, questions that council and staff are seeking advice from the public on. And as an example, right now, we have a questionnaire having to do with the Economic Development Action Plan and another questionnaire having to do with the lobbyist registry. So I hope that people will take the time to have a look at the issues that are burning at this end of the table and provide us with their input. Secondly, the Indigenous 150 Plus presentation, which was presented earlier this year at the Simcoe Street Theatre and was sold out, is being presented again. It is celebrating the reclamation of Indigenous knowledge. It will be this Wednesday night at the Simcoe Street Theatre at 7 p.m. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Berman.
Nothing for me tonight.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just to let everyone know that at the Collingwood Public Library, courtesy of the Teen Advisory Committee, there's complimentary gift wrapping on Saturdays, December 7th and the 14th from 2 to 4 p.m. So if you're an early shopper but you don't like to wrap, then that's a great opportunity for you. So that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two community announcements, both with respect to United Way, Simcoe Muskoka. The first one is on Monday, December the 2nd at the Simcoe Street Theatre. United Way is presenting a film. It's called Us and Them, and it's a screening of a documentary of 4 homeless Canadians that was shot over 10 years, and so they follow these individuals for 10 years. It's a documentary, of course, illustrates the sensitivity of the reality of living without a permanent home. So this particular film is sponsored by the Georgian Communities and Sierra Developments. It also features 2 people who we know well. Marg Chabanetti, a local realtor and champion for those who are homeless and who's chair of the Out of the Cold initiative that Deputy Mayor Hull just spoke about. And also Andrew Seaworth will be featured in the film, who's the president of Blue Mountain Village Association and a member of the Blue Mountains Attainable Housing Corporation, which is addressing strategies to create attainable and inclusive housing in our community. So, sorry for all that, but that's just to repeat, Monday, December the 2nd, Simcoe Street Theatre. The second thing is, the event is around Women United, which I believe the United Way Simcoe Muskoka has a chapter in Barrie, so they are having an event here that will be held at Butter on Tuesday, December the 10th from 10 to 8:30. It's a drop-in, and I'll just read you a few sentences here. Women United is a force for change in Simcoe Muskoka. We recognize that each and every woman and girl has potential to do great things. We invite you to join Women United at Butter for an opportunity to learn about the issues impacting girls and women in our region. Enjoy meeting other women who share your interests and hear from people focused on issues and work that address them. So I'll be there that evening and look forward to anyone else who might like to come. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I have a few announcements for myself. It's certainly great to be back from the trip to Kitano, and I will speak more about that under other business, but I did want to thank the Deputy Mayor and Councillor MacLeod and everyone around the council table who helped fill in while I was away. it sounds like things were going very well here, to the point where I was getting emails to say, you can extend your trip, no rush. But it's great to be back. As Dorothy says, there's no place like home. On Saturday, I had the opportunity to attend the Institute of South Georgian Bay Symposium on Social Innovation at the Simcoe Street Theatre. It was an incredible, thought-provoking day, and so congratulations to all involved with that. And I know Councillor Hamlin sits on the South Georgian Bay Institute board, so that was a great way to come back. And this Friday, I will be heading off to the Auto Mayors meeting in Oakville. I raised that in part because when I was in Tokyo, I went to the NSG headquarters. NSG owns Pilkington Glass. They bought it in 2006, and they consider it to be one of the crown jewels of their global enterprise. They have operations in every continent, and they produce windshield glass, both for manufacturing, but also aftermarket replacement windshields for 4 or 5 automotive makers, and their business has been flourishing to the point where, if you've noticed when you're driving by, they're looking for more employees. And the automotive world, technical glass, the automotive glass is extremely important as we move with our sensors towards autonomous vehicles. They are critical to the functioning of those vehicles with the sensors that are built right into the windshields. So it was a very interesting meeting in Tokyo with the president and CEO, and to sort of get a window into how important their operations here in Collingwood are to them, and they're a global company. The last piece of information I have today is extremely unfortunate and very tragic. When last Wednesday morning we lost a county council member, Scott Jeremy, the deputy mayor for Oromadante, passed away. And tomorrow I will be attending his funeral, and so it just reminds us how tentative life is, and how we all work together for the betterment of our communities. It's a big loss for Oromadante and for the county. So our thoughts go out to Scott's family and the county. And that is it for me. Public meetings, we don't have one. No deputations tonight. So we will move to the consent agenda. Councillor McLeod.
Oh, over here.
No, I'm sorry, Councillor Coney.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Doherty, be it resolved that the general consent agenda, having been given due consideration, by council, be received, and thus items 8.1 through 8.7.
Thank you. So I will call the vote on receiving the items, and then I'll ask for items to be pulled. So for receiving the consent items, all in favor? It's passed unanimously. Are there items that would like to be pulled? Councillor Hamlin.
Both 8.1 and 8.3.
Any others, council?
Point of order. Do we not have new procedural bylaws whereby you can't pull unless you give 24 hours notice?
I will look to the clerk on that one.
Through your worship to the council, but that's only if you're wanting to move items forward for consideration. And Councillor Hamlin did provide me with notice.
Right. Seeing no others, then I will turn the floor over to you, Councillor Hamlin. 8.1.
Oh, thank you. Your worship, 8.1 is a submission from Collingwood Arts, Culture and Entertainment Group. And as we are probably all aware, this is a local grassroots organization that has come together with a vision to establish Collingwood as the center of arts, culture and entertainment in the South Georgian Bay area. It has noticed and therefore has a project of this nature that we lack facilities here to support not only our own local people in the arts and culture community, but those in the surrounding communities. I would just note that what the proposal is in particular, and I'll just read this sentence, is to build a world-class, adaptable, multi-purpose arts, culture, and entertainment center that is commercially successful by attracting professional artists and productions while still supporting local talent and programs and both the current and future needs of the community. The ask in their submission to us tonight is they are seeking council support for a feasibility study to be conducted in 2020 that includes terms of reference for this facility. So I wanted to ask if I could make a motion to put this to our consideration for the budget for 2020.
Thank you for that. I can note that we have had a number of meetings with the case group, myself and Director Culver, and in fact the request for the feasibility study is part of the 2020 budget deliberations. So that is moving forward on that front, and that will be up for discussion as we get into the budget. Councillor Jeffrey, did you have a comment?
I do. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, and I thank Councillor Hammond for pulling this. I too was interested in pulling this one, but I would be also interested in seeing it being referred to the Strategic Initiatives Committee because the strategic plan refresh drives the budget considerations, and I think it's really important to receive public input on this through that process. So I would like it to go to our Strategic Initiatives Committee for public input because they will have that opportunity on Thursday.
Yes, I think they're certainly welcome to come as part of the, it is a standing committee meeting, so there will be open forum, and we would invite the members of the committee to come. You can speak at that point in time during the SIC meeting, so I think you can consider yourself invited. 8.3.
Thank you. This is a letter from our Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, where I think the main point, as we all know, is they're not going to be imposing any governmental changes at the local level. But they also, he also indicates that there will be a $125 million fund for small municipalities to support service delivery reviews, and that details of applications and so on will be forthcoming. And I really just had a question of staff as to whether this will be something that we'll be able to consider for our community.
To the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Hamlin. Yes, we have provided the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing with an indication that we will be applying for to access that funding.
Okay, thank you. And the second thing that came out of this letter is an indication that the Ontario government's going to have one voters list for both the Ontario election and municipalities, which I thought sounded great, having one voters list. And I just had a question to staff. Does that mean we won't have to do our own voters list, and is this a good thing?
Clerk, Deputy Clerk.
Through your worship to Councillor Hamlin, at this point they're just looking at reviewing it. It hasn't been determined whether it'll be operated through Ontario elections yet. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered with respect to non-residents and whatnot, and managing the list. So I think it's a little premature to determine that at this point.
Okay, thank you. Those are my
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. And just to pick up on this item and the subsequent item 8.4, which is the press release from the County of Simcoe, while this review was in process, the Simcoe County struck two subcommittees to look at this. One was a standing committee on governance, and the other was looking at efficiencies from the county's perspective. And so now that this decision has been made, the subcommittee looking at the efficiencies will be meeting on December 16th to explore the items that we identified previously and how there might be ways we can find efficiencies in our operations at the county and at the municipal level as well. So stay tuned on that. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I had more of a comment on 8.3 as well. I was really disappointed to see the province moving toward, although we're happy to see, I guess, a chance at some extra money. I was very disappointed to see that they've gone to an application process instead of an allocation increase in some areas, because now municipalities are going to be spending money to make applications for money they may not get, and I think it's a waste of our resources. And so I don't know if we have an opportunity anywhere to forward that disappointment on, if it's a council thought, but I was really disappointed to read it.
Noted. All right, then, moving on, we don't have any reports or minutes of other committees. Development and Operations Services Standing Committee meeting of November 18, 2019. So just as a lead into this, before I pass it over to the chair, Councillor Jeffrey, under our new procedural bylaw, any items that passed unanimously at the committee will now come forward almost in the form of a consent agenda. So the difference being here between our previous consent agenda practices that we will not be going right to the motion to adopt the items therein without first asking if there are items to be pulled, because the result of the motion to adopt the items, approve them, is that they will now be approved. So if you want to pull items that are listed under the consent agenda format, items 10.1.1 through 10.1.6, you need to pull them before the vote. So having said that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. Be it resolved that Council received the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held November 18, 2019, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. 10.1.1 Tax Relief Program, Andrea Leeming, Collingwood Heritage Committee. 10.1.2 the Collingwood Heritage Committee minutes. 10.1.3 P 2019-52 Official Plan Amendment, Balmoral Village, Blocks 1 through 4, Town File Number D08219. 10.1.4 P 2019-50 Proposed Naming Bylaw for 23 and 25 Maple Street. 10.1.5 General Consent Agenda, Development and Operations Services Standing Committee. And finally 10.1.6 PRC 2019-19 Sunset Point High Water and Storm Damage Remediation. Mayor Saunderson, I was going to ask you to do an update, because my understanding is if I want something out of our meeting to happen within that, it would have to happen now, but I understand you're doing a report on the advisory committee under other business anyway?
Yes, I plan to do that.
All right, so we won't miss that. All right.
Okay. So then before I call a vote, is there any items that council members would like to pull before you vote on receiving? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on receiving the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Councillor Jeffrey.
Moved by me, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. Be it resolved that staff report PW 2019-20 be received and council approve the design of a sidewalk and associated tree removal along the east side of Hurontario Street between Lockhart Road and Tracy Lane for the purpose of providing pedestrian access.
So this item is being dealt with separately because it was not a unanimous vote. There was some opposition at committee level, and before I look for comments around the table, Director McDonald, I'm wondering if you can do a brief recap of the discussion that happened, the presentation that happened, so we're familiar with what's involved here.
Thank you, Your Worship. This particular report is, we've come across a very unique challenge in terms of designing and constructing a sidewalk in its standard location. There are a number of large trees that would interfere with that location, and given the sensitivity around that, we felt it was appropriate to approach council before we initiated design and ensure that the design concept that we would like to proceed with was acceptable to council. It will mean the destruction of 50 some odd trees, and we've looked at alternative locations in terms of behind the curb, and the preferred location is away from the curb where safety is most prominent in terms of pedestrians walking next to a very busy road. There's 10,000 cars a day on that road. And we would include replacement of those trees. Unfortunately, the spacing of the original trees were very tight, and that spacing is not recommended by our landscape architect. It would be a larger spacing. At the meeting, there was some discussion around possible alternative locations for trees, and we, subsequent to that, we looked at placing some trees across the street from this location, as well as up both north and south of the location. We were able to find a location for 20 more trees. It isn't exactly 1-to-1 ratio, but it's much closer than originally proposed. There was a question at committee that came with respect to bike lanes. We looked at the road section, and the width of the road would not accommodate bike lanes. Curb to curb is too narrow. We looked at possibility narrowing the driving lanes in the center turn lane, but unfortunately we cannot accommodate bike lanes within the curb section. It's not our intent to rebuild the road. This was merely an ask for extension of the sidewalk. But however, we did subsequent to that look at alternatives that we could perhaps mitigate some of the more younger cyclists, where we would provide a wider sidewalk. And I think we're in a very preliminary design, but I think there's a possibility for us to expand the width of the sidewalk and still accommodate the trees we planned. And hopefully we can get a sidewalk between 2 and 3 meters in width, which is a little bit wider than the standard, and it would help with some of the younger children and students that might want to use the sidewalk for riding bike. I think there's a few other things, but I think that kind of summarizes our discussions that we had at the meeting and some of the subsequent discussions we had.
Right. Thank you, Brian. I'll look for questions and comments around the table. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. The committee had a very thorough report as well, and did consider all of the alternatives. I would like to propose an amendment at the beginning to discuss before we discuss the motion, and that would be, and the council approve replacement of double, that would be 118 trees on municipal or private properties before the end of planting season 2020. So there would be the proposed design, which at this point may only be able to take 25, but the additional trees would be offered to either the private properties that are impacted along the stretch of road and or other municipal properties, and perhaps some through our very generous donation, but that we commit to replacing. We're taking 59 that we will put in 118 in our community.
Do we have a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor? So then just dealing with the amendment that's on the table. Questions or comments, Council? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I'll make the same comment that I made during standing committee in regard to the number of trees. And although I think double is a great recommendation, it is apropos of nothing because we don't have our urban canopy strategy yet. And it may be that the strategy would dictate that we would want to replace those trees 2-to-1. But it may also dictate that we may be considering something less than 2-to-1, and perhaps there are other areas in the municipality where it is even more urgent that we invest in, because they cost. We invest in new tree canopy. So that is my only comment. I'm not opposed to supporting this, but I think for the sake of a couple of weeks, which is what we've been told is the estimated arrival of our urban canopy strategy, that we could perhaps defer to that document once it is received.
Okay, I'll look for clarification from Councillor Jeffrey, but I think our motion didn't preclude the planting of these trees in any other location. And so, and I think in addition, it's not overriding the urban canopy recommendations. It's just stipulating that in this project, we're looking at a 2-to-1 replacement. I would look to Director McDonald to see if there's any implications in a delay. And my understanding is that we're trying to marry this work with some work being done on the intersection, and there is a timeline to that. So there are efficiencies to be found that I understand are in the 10 to 15% range, as well as not having your intersection gummed up with construction on more than one opportunity. But I'll look to Director McDonald.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is correct. We would like to package this project with another existing project, the intersection improvements at Lockhart and here, Ontario. We proceeded with those in 2019 this year, and unfortunately, due to our timing, we were only able to get one price for that particular project, and we've moved it off to next year, and we'd like to move forward with, we've got the design, but we'd like to move forward with the tendering in early winter so that we're ready to go in the spring and hopefully take advantage of other bid opportunities that may arise by going out to tender in the winter.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Councillor Jeffley, I'll give you an opportunity to clarify on any point you think.
Yeah, I think that this is able to be referred through that tree canopy discussion anyway, because the amendment is simply, and the council approve replacement of double the trees, 118 on municipal or private properties before the end of the planting season of 2020. So however those get allocated through whatever process satisfied, I just want to make, as a result of this, we get double the trees.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to I'm going to suggest it's Director McDonald, but it might actually be Director Culver. 59 additional trees will being replaced or following Councillor Jeffrey's thought process with the 118 trees. Could someone provide for me perhaps a dollar figure that would add to the price of this project? Currently, we're looking at $250,000. What are 59 or 82 extra trees? What is that going to cost us?
No,
Sorry.
we'll put that through to the staff. So the question is, what would the additional 59 trees price tag be?
Through your worship, we had originally budgeted for the original tree replacement 25 trees at $17,500, and a full replacement would be $82,600. So the difference is $65,000
Thank you.
in that ballpark.
Thank you.
Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you. Firstly, just on the question that Councillor McLeod has asked, if I could ask a follow-up of Director McDonald. If we were able to use some of the trees that have been graciously donated to us, would that reduce that amount? If we
Certainly that will reduce it substantially. Yeah.
Thank you. Also, I just wanted to add, I'm fully in support of Councillor Jeffrey's motion. In preparation for today's meeting, I did a little looking on Google, as we're all wont to do, to see what other municipalities do. And I was quite intrigued by what Seattle does, because they have recognized in a pretty lengthy document that both sidewalks and trees are important public assets, and have recognized that we don't take down trees unless we absolutely have to, which I understand is the circumstance. But their policy is that if trees have to come down to accommodate a sidewalk, they are replaced in a 2-to-1 ratio, which is exactly Councillor Jeffrey's suggestion. But they have one additional caveat, that it be in the same corridor, which of course is, just depends on the circumstances. So perhaps I just leave this with staff when this is coming forward for design, and perhaps through our canopy study, we can consider whether those trees could be accommodated in the corridor. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Doherty?
Thank you, Your Worship. This comment is not in regard to the particular amendment, but this is a suggestion for an additional amendment that would also speak to staff's intention of looking at options for incorporating bike lanes within this project. So whether they be through a double-wide sidewalk, or nearly double-wide sidewalk, or as I understand it from the Ontario Traffic Manual, that another option could be that the roadway itself could be marked with bicycle and Sharrow markings and share the road signage, such that it's not quite a bike lane, but it certainly sends the message to motorists that they should expect to see cyclists on the roadway. Preference, of course, would be a wider sidewalk, but ultimately my point is that we have recently adopted a cycling strategy, and I think it is critical that this first project that we undertake should reflect that.
So we're dealing now only with the amendment on the table. And if you want to bring a further amendment to deal with that after this one has been dealt with, you can do that. And I'm going to call Councillor Pelley.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question for Councillor, through you to Councillor Jeffrey. I just wanted to ensure, so that we're going to double the trees, but is priority being given to the trees first being replaced next to the sidewalk along the boulevard, or is the amendment indifferent as to where the trees are placed,
No, I think this is on 25 trees will go back on the immediate area.
if possible, right?
Yes, and they will determine that before, once the design is done, whether it will go. And then the additional trees will go hopefully in that area, and as well be made available to potentially private residents, and then at the discretion of council or the staff.
Okay, so the amendment is not overriding that.
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Councillor Madigan.
Yeah, it won't be long. Thank you very much, Councillor Jeffrey. You have three very happy people on this side of the table that all said that changed it for us, so thank you very much. And it's a no-brainer to be a court order to the city that we should push safety, but beautification as well. So thank you very much for doing this, because it changed my vote 100%. Thank you.
All right, well, that's it then. I'm going to call the vote on the amendment, which is to increase the tree replacement to a 2-to-1 ratio, so 118 trees. All in favor? That is carried unanimously, and that takes us back to our original motion, which deals with the installation of the sidewalk and the removal of the trees to do that. So, questions, comments? Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Your Worship. So at this time, may I propose an additional amendment?
Yes?
Thank you. And the amendment that I would like to propose is that this creation of sidewalk will, in one manner or another, accommodate cyclist and other active transportation along the same route.
Okay, you're going to have to clarify for me. Are you asking, because we've heard from the director, they're going to look at the possibility of widening the sidewalk, if that's doable? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, I am, but it's not written into the resolution here.
So I will look for a seconder. Councillor Hamlin. And then I guess just ask the director if he can comment on the feasibility. Are we able to commit to that, or how? What would be the best way to phrase that?
Through your worship, certainly we have had some preliminary look at the width of the boulevard, and I think it is possible that we can widen the sidewalk to a minimum of 2 meters. I can't commit to 3 meters without knowing where the bell and other factors that may interfere with our design. And we can commit that we will look at that through the design process and maximize the width of that sidewalk to the extent that we can in terms of it being a multi-use trail, which is typically a 3-meter trail.
Does that assist? Councillor Doherty?
Yes, I guess the only other alternative that I would like to see considered is, if it is not feasible to widen that sidewalk, that consideration be made to some accommodation of cyclists on the roadway in the manner in which I described, which is also described in Ontario Traffic Manual, Book 18.
Okay, I know we're getting into a separate issue. I think maybe that's a broader topic, so maybe we could do a wait and see on that, see if we can get the sidewalk widened, and if not, then you can put your motion forward for the additional roadway work.
Okay.
Okay, so then we're just dealing with the motion then to have the sidewalk explored between 2 to 3 meters in diameter or in width. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I don't have an issue with cyclists cycling, but I have an issue with maybe confusing some of the children in our community that they can ride on some sidewalks, but they can't ride on others. So that is my fear. We have a great trail system, so, and with the wayfinding, there could be options for them to get off of Highway 124 and head on to the extensive trail system. But we have a lot of kids in those areas going to the Catholic French School, the St. Mary's, Cameron Street. I just don't want to confuse the kids that some sidewalks are safe to ride on and okay, and some aren't. And there's so much out there of, you know, us trying to be everything to everybody, and unfortunately, I don't think in this instance we can be.
Maybe I'll look to Director Culver. I know there is a mixture already with the first street sidewalks. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so through your worship, I don't think, there's no prescription in the cycling plan for either a wider sidewalk or on-street treatments on here Ontario /124. So we'd be acting, I mean, I think a wider sidewalk is silent because that was never contemplated. I think the on-street treatment was actually deliberately undertaken to not be added to here Ontario because of the concerns there. There are connecting Golfview to Lockhart, where shared amenities, shared facilities exist or are possible, definitely makes some sense. So a wider sidewalk, I think, can be supported with the intention of the cycling plan. The on-road treatments would be a challenge given the other prescriptions in the document.
Okay, and just for clarification, we're only dealing with the sidewalk on this motion. So, any other questions or comments before I call the vote? Oh, Deputy Mayor.
Through you to the director, moving from a 2 to a 3 meter sidewalk, is that in theory a 1/3 additional cost, or is it can you give us some sort of ballpark as to what the cost will be?
Through your worship, it's not a 1/3 additional cost. There's a number of other costs associated with our works there in terms of there's some grade issues, there's the tree removal. I'd have to do a quick calculation and get back to you, but I don't believe it's a 1/3. It'll be less than 1/3.
Are you able to, do you want to follow up on this?
Well, I'm just, unfortunately, I guess, I was looking at the calendar, and our calendar hasn't been loaded into January, so I don't know when our next council meeting is, but under normal circumstances, would we not kick this back and allow staff to give us an updated report on the actual cost of what the trees are gonna be and what the sidewalk's gonna be, bring it back through committee, bring it back to council for full approval? I mean, I'm generally in support of this, I just would like to know what the cost is, that's all.
I'll look to the CAO, but I think that's correct. I don't know if there's a way to deal with the main motion and defer the amendment, or, because I know we want to get the design going, and we've got some timelines here.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think if staff is given direction to proceed with the design work, we can get some of that work done now. I know time is of the essence and we're getting into the no construction season soon. But I think the point of the cost of this, both the trees and the capital cost for incrementally adding 1 meter to the sidewalk, I think is reasonable. So I have no concerns if council were to approve the main motion and give us the opportunity to come back with some former numbers on the cost both for the trees as well as the enhanced sidewalk work.
Director McDonald?
This is a budget item too. We can certainly bring this in the next week in terms of advise you of the budget change, and that would be appropriate time to approve the project. But as the CAO mentioned, we can get going on the design, and the additional budget costs could be addressed to council during our committee budget deliberations.
Okay, thank you for that. So my understanding, speaking with the clerk, is to get forward with the main motion, we can't defer the amendment. So what I would ask Councillor Doherty is if you'd consider withdrawing the amendment on the understanding you'll bring it back on the budget process to have that addressed, so that we can deal with the main motion to get the work going, the preparation, and that your amendment would be dealt with at the budget level, based on the input we get from staff on the consequences.
I will withdraw the request for the amendment, but I will be looking forward to seeing this matter dealt with during the budget process.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, so with that being withdrawn pending the budget discussions, where we will be dealing with that, we will deal then with the main motion. Yes, as amended. Did you have a question, Councillor Coleman?
I do, thank you.
Okay.
Through your worship, I did want to ask Director McDonald if he has an approximate timeline on when he'll know if the bell infrastructure is going to interfere with the trees being planted along the boulevard next to the sidewalk.
Director McDonald?
Unfortunately, I cannot predict that. We're gonna have to get locates and we haven't initiated that pending today's approval, so it could be several weeks.
And my recollection, based on the standing committee meeting, is that you were going to come back before the construction started to tell us where the trees could be planted and if there are any complications.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that would be appreciated. I have a follow-up comment to make. And I make this comment in light of, Councillor Madigan, touched on the beautification that trees add to an area, but I would think that a council that also voted on a climate emergency would have some interest in the carbon absorption that the trees are providing, because I think our residents that have written to us express that concern. I'm certainly not an environmental scientist, but the research I put together looks something like this, that a tree absorbs 22 kilograms of carbon per year. This is the destruction of 56 trees, so that would be approximately 1,300 kilograms of carbon absorption per year lost with those gone. Cars produce 120 grams per kilometer of carbon driven. A round trip from Tracy Lane to City Hall is approximately 4 kilometers round trip, so that produces approximately half a kilogram of carbon. Eden Oak, this neighborhood, will have upwards of 376 residents, and according to statistics, the average home has 1.5 cars, which would give us 564 cars in this neighborhood. And remembering that this sidewalk would need to entice 1,300 kilograms of carbon reduction per year to welcome the destruction of those trees. Translated into trips to and from downtown, this equals 2,600 car trips to and from the Eden Oak neighborhood using the sidewalk. And taking that back over to those 564 cars, this would give us the need for approximately 5 cars per year to use that sidewalk in lieu of driving, let's say, from that neighborhood to downtown. Of course, I'm in favor of sidewalks, and we know that sidewalks for kids getting to school and active transportation is important. But we know that as a council that's declared a climate emergency, that this lens must also be looked at. So I'm grateful to Councillor Jeffrey for adding in the doubling of the trees, and I'd encourage us and like us as a council that potentially within our staff reports this type of research is contained, because I think our residents expressed both the need for the beautification, but for us to have an environmental lens to it as well. So I just wanted to share that research, and I hope perhaps going forward our staff might be able to provide us that type of lens as well.
I take your point. I'm just wondering, your calculations, did that include 118 trees 5 or 10 years out for the consumption they would provide?
It doesn't, and it gets a little trickier. A mature tree versus a young tree, and there's actually a lot of research into the type of trees. I'm not an environmental scientist, but it would be great to have some of that input. But of course it did not, therefore include that offset.
Okay, well, certainly something to look forward to. All right, with that being said, I am now going to call the vote on the main motion for the sidewalk on Hurontario Street. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. And what do we have next? Bylaws. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-077, being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 44 to the official plan of the town of Collingwood, be enacted and passed this 25th day of November 2019, and that is with reference to Balmoral Village.
So this is the bylaw that's attached to item 10.1.3, which was passed under the staff report. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Next bylaw.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-078, being a bylaw under subsection 4 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13, as amended to deem a part of a plan of subdivision not to be a registered plan of subdivision for the purposes of subsection 50, subsection 3, with respect to land commonly known as 23 and 25 Maple Street, be enacted and passed this 25th day of November 2019, and I'm sorry I do not have the reference number here for that bylaw, for the original report.
10.1.4. I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, and I think that's it for you, Councillor Jeffrey. Thank you very much. Staff reports, 11.1, HR 2019-03 Memorandum of Settlement. Who would have that? Councillor Maddox.
That would be me, sir. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor McLeod. Be it resolved that staff report HR 2019-03 be received and the council ratify the memorandum of settlement between the corporation of the town of Collingwood and Collingwood Professional Firefighters Association Local 938 IAFF, signed September 19, 2019, for a renewed collective agreement for a period January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2023.
Thank you. Understanding this is a good news story. Chief Parr, do you want to take us through the nuts and bolts of this?
Through you, your worship, yeah, this was a real good news story, especially for myself. I hope it's the last one I have to negotiate before I retire, so it's good for us. There was a lot of concessions from the association, and we believe that the costing moving forward was considered to the corporation also. So, and for 1 hour and 21 minutes of bargaining, I think we did really well.
It's got to be a record in itself. Was there a fire? All right. Questions or comments, council? Seeing that, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. We have bylaw number 2019-79. Who has that?
That's me again.
Okay.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor McLeod. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-079, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a 4-year collective agreement between the corporation of the town of Collingwood and the Collingwood Professional Firefighters Association Local 938 IAFF, be enacted and passed this 25th day of November 2019.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Congratulations to you, Chief, and to Ms. McQuaig and all staff involved on getting that done in such short order and on such favorable terms. Item 12, motions. 12.1, Councillor Jeffrey, you have a motion.
I do.
Pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Berman, whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, and ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, ICLEI Canada, have established the Partners for Climate Protection PCP program to provide a forum for municipal governments to share their knowledge and experience with other municipal governments on how to reduce GHG emissions. And whereas over 350 municipal governments across Canada, representing more than 65% of the population, have already committed to reducing corporate and community GHG emissions through the PCP program since its inception in 1994. And whereas the PCP program is based on a 5-milestone framework that involves completing a GHG inventory and forecast, setting a GHG reduction target, developing a local action plan, implementing the plan, and monitoring progress and reporting results. Be it resolved that the municipality of the town of Collingwood review the guidelines on Partners for Climate Protection Program, member benefits and responsibilities, and then communicate to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and International Council for Local Environment Initiatives Canada its participation in the PCP program and its commitment to achieving the milestones set out in the PCP 5 milestone framework. And be it further resolved that the town of Collingwood CAO assign staff resources and one elected official to oversee the implementation of the PCP milestones and be the points of contact for the PCP program within the town of Collingwood. And with your permission, I'd like to speak first, Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. I think we all know that we did the emergency climate change emergency motion. But for me, when I read this, what it did was brought us a structure and resources at no cost through which we can implement and know that we are hitting targets or addressing the right things to reach targets that give us the best results. So as I said, there's 350 municipalities, but the reality is that our municipalities have control or influence half of the Canada's sources that emit greenhouse gas. So it's really important that we participate, and it's very important that we include the households as well. And that I think that what comes at no cost is 5 regional climate advisor teams available to us, and the software to be able to do the baseline and to document our progress going forward. It's an excellent program. There's already 180 plus local climate change action plans prepared, so we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're going to be able to lean very heavily on some other municipalities to help us get there. So I thought it was a great resource for us and entirely free. And all they ask is that we move through the milestone framework within 10 years as of joining, and that we report on our progress at least once every 2 years with FCM's support to be able to do that with the software. And that's it.
Council, questions or comments? Well, I have one. I think this is a worthwhile program. As we talked about the environmental issues and our carbon footprint, and looking at how we conduct our business as a municipal public corporation, what our footprint is, looking at the environmental audit and getting the type of data to quantify things that Councillor Comey spoke of. I think this is a positive step forward, and there's funding available, and this is becoming an extremely critical issue on all fronts. So I see this as a very positive step, so I will be supporting it. That said, then I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. The next motion up is item 12.2, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Your Worship. We got trees and air and now water. Moved by Councillor McLeod, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Whereas the town of Collingwood has recently declared a climate emergency, and whereas the town of Collingwood has committed to 9 core principles of sustainability, and whereas the town of Collingwood is a beneficiary of the upstream environmental remediation work done by the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, and whereas the town of Collingwood is a member of the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority with representation on its board of directors, and whereas under that direction of the board of directors, the NVCA provides programs and services addressing local priorities to the residents of Collingwood and its other member municipalities, including inclusive outdoor education and recreation, water quality monitoring, preservation of species at risk, as well as protecting life and property through a variety of measures. And whereas the NVCA provides the town of Collingwood with expert advice on the environmental impact of land use planning proposals, and that the municipality does not have staff with comparable expertise or experience, and whereas the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks provides approximately 1% of the budget for programs and services currently delivered by the NVCA. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Collingwood supports Conservation Authority regulations under Bill 108 being completed in consultation with the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority and Conservation Ontario, and that the town of Collingwood supports continuation of the programs and services endorsed by the NVCA Board of Directors, and that the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks continue to allow local municipalities designated representatives to determine which programs will be delivered and mandatory, along with the use of a board-directed fair municipal levy as per current regulation. And that this resolution be forwarded to the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, Premier Doug Ford, MPP Jim Wilson, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, Conservation in Ontario, and all Ontario municipalities. And I would like to speak to this first, if that would be okay with you, Your Worship.
Absolutely, the floor is yours, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you so much. So the motion that took an hour and a half to read there is one that I feel builds on the leadership that regarding environmental stewardship, which has already been demonstrated in this chamber. Previous councils committed to 9 principles of sustainability. Included on our strategic plan, which we'll be discussing on later this week, is wording regarding a healthy environment. And in recent months, the Mayor introduced a motion regarding reduction of use of single-use plastics, and Councillor Berman introduced a motion acknowledging the climate crisis. So both of those passed unanimously. And as councillors, I'm sure we have an idea of what conservation authorities do, but to quickly clarify, the NBCA and Collingwood have a memorandum of understanding already in place regarding the provision of services. The NBCA is a not-for-profit, it has charitable status and a budget this year of just under $5 million. It manages 13,000 acres of land within our watershed and is our commenting agency for development plans in areas designated as natural or hazardous. So its planners and its scientists work with our planners to review development applications under the Planning Act to be sure that they meet our environmental standards and provincial regulations about development near streams and rivers and creeks and in wetlands as well. The NBCA also does environmental remediation, including streams and watercourses, and environmental science, including flood forecasting. So the work that is done there prevents damage to people and property, sometimes by not allowing development in areas that are prone to flooding, and that saves tax and insurance dollars. For example, in February of 2016, the Federal Parliamentary Budget Officer, in its report on disaster funding, said that Ontario's conservation authorities saved hundreds of millions of tax dollars by preventing development in floodplains across Ontario. This was in the analysis of the billion-dollar floods that took place in Alberta in 2013, $5 billion in damage there. They don't have conservation authorities in Alberta. The NBCA also repairs creeks and wetlands that have been degraded by development or agriculture. So what this motion is intended to do is to add Collingwood's voice to a growing chorus of municipalities across Ontario, which are asking the province to take into consideration the municipality's role in conservation authorities when they write the regulations that accompany Bill 108. Those regulations have not yet been written. It is in response to similar motions from other municipalities, including our neighbours in Grey Highlands and in Blue Mountains, and the municipalities of Burlington and Oakville and Milton and Halton Hills and Halton Region and Southwest Oxford and Aylmer and St. Thomas and Central Elgin, as well as several others. It is also an echo of feedback to the province on Bill 108 from the Association of Municipalities. So briefly, okay, it's too late to be brief, but briefly, a part of Bill 108 concerning conservation authorities passed back in May. There was a cabinet shuffle in June, and the new minister is Jeff Urich. He's in charge of Environment, Conservation and Parks. It's his first time as a cabinet minister. And in August, he released a letter asking conservation authorities to wind down their non-mandatory programs. His letter did not say what non-mandatory programs are. There are 4 core activities, that's the words that are used in the Conservation Act as amended. Protection of life and property, source water protection, management of conservation lands, and then there's special wording regarding Lake Simcoe, which doesn't actually apply to us. Provincial regulation as it is currently written or unwritten is silent on whether the management of conservation lands can include things like education, or tapping maple trees, or selling maple syrup, or operating summer camps for newly arrived Syrian refugee children, which is one of the things that the NBCA does. Just regarding money, the NBCA has received yearly from the province since the late 1990s $188,000. This summer, that funding was cut in half in the middle of the year to $97,000 on a $5 million budget. Currently, the town of Collingwood contributes nearly triple what the province contributes to the work that the NVCA does. There are 18 member municipalities, all of which contribute to half of the NVCA's budget. The rest is coming from fees from planning services and fees generated from the conservation areas. So, in summation, this motion is not intended to be controversial. It is not intended to cause consternation or confusion or any type of a quarrel. It is meant simply to reaffirm Collingwood's relationship with the NVCA, to defend its existence, and to request the provincial government consult, as it writes its regulation, with the board of directors of the CAs, that's us, and Conservation Ontario, which is the umbrella organization that looks after the 36 conservation authorities. It does not commit us to anything other than asking the province to consult before the regulations are written and to respect the long-standing relationship between municipalities like ours and the conservation authorities whose work we pay for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. I think that Councillor McLeod has done a great job of explaining to us what the MVCA is responsible for. I think what concerned me more with respect to this was the implications of us taking a position in light of Simcoe County's review that was undertaken and will be continued to be undertaken, and maybe some confusing information we had originally as to what core services are or are not from the MVCA presentation to us at the last budget request. And I'm wondering about a deferral to allow our Executive Director Skinner and Councillor McLeod to provide us with an overview in terms of implications and the relationships between county MOU and the MVCA, if there is one, and those relationships that we're not going to go out and make a statement that puts us in a bad spot down the road. I believe in the message that he who pays should say. In this case, it's the municipalities that pay and they should have the most say. But I think we need to be cognizant of the other relationships and things that they're going on around us. And I do worry about, because there have been some opposing views that we have received on the consent agenda and not getting into the fray. So that is my request for a deferral, only specifically until we can be updated by the Executive Director and Councillor McLeod in terms of those relationships.
All right, so request for deferral has been made. I need a seconder to put that on the floor. Councillor Berman, it is a deferral, so there's no commentary or comments on it. I will just be calling the vote. But I would ask for a point of clarification just in terms of the scheduling. Councillor Jeffrey, when do you see this coming? Or what type of deferral timeline are you asking for?
That would be at staff's discretion for sure. I think they have to facilitate it, so I'm not going to dictate it.
Okay.
Whatever works best in terms of what we need to get in.
Maybe I'll look to Executive Director Skinner. What do you think is a feasible timeline here?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it is not too much work to put together the, should it be voted upon that way, to put together the summary information, so potentially within half a month to a month, depending on the scheduling availability of agenda time.
December the 16th is our next council meeting. Does that provide sufficient time? January 20th is the following week. What's a reasonable timeline? Is it very tight or else it goes to January?
Through you, Worship, I don't have any concerns with staff coming back to committee or council with a public education piece. I guess my concern with this item being deferred to the December 15th agenda is that agenda is fairly crowded. That's the agenda that we plan on bringing together the budget for approval. That's the only consideration. It's the number of items that will land on that agenda item, that particular council agenda.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we're looking at January 20 for that. So with that timeline in in mind then, I will call the vote. All in favor of the deferral? Opposed? And the deferral is carried. Bylaws, we have none. Notices of motion, any notices of motion, council? Council business, old or deferred business? Other business? Any other business, council? Councillor Hammond.
This is my United Way night. There's also something that's run out of the United Way for Simcoe Muskoka called Youth United. And they've just now opened up an application process that will award grants of up to $2,500 to support youth to create projects to help reduce the effects of poverty and promote social inclusion in their community. These kind of projects have to be in partnership with a community partner, which would be a charity. I just wanted to make mention of this because for anyone who may have ideas of projects, now's the time to apply, and they should just go to the website, I would suggest, for United Way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. Any other business? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. A resident had asked me about getting back on the topic of MBCA, had asked me the question about the shoreline protection remediation policies that were in place at MBCA. And I'm just wondering whether a request could go through planning and or our MBCA rep with respect to seeing if they are satisfactory. I know the example I was given was from the Ossibel Bayfield Conservation Authority on the shores of Lake Huron, west of us. And I'm just wondering about, given the implications of the high water, that we should ensure that we have the best possible policies in place with respect to that.
Mr. McLeod?
I'm just checking my outbox. I believe I sent you that report.
It was based on Wasaga Beach. It did cite, through you, Mayor Saunderson, it did cite, originally it was started with respect to shoreline, but whatever, the recommendations were specifically cited as for Wasaga Beach. I just want us to check. If planning is satisfied that we have the proper policies for shoreline, then I'm happy to, but I have to ask permission for that, so.
Yes, so I guess perhaps the first point would be for Councillor McLeod to follow up and see if there's anything specific to Collingwood.
Sure can.
And then with that answer, we'll move forward based on what information we get back. Is that satisfying?
That's perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. So if there's no other business, I have two items that I wanted to address today. And the first was the Kitano trip. Everyone can go home and practice your chopsticks. Those are fresh from Tokyo. And first of all, I guess I would like to thank the organizers and the group leaders, Terry Kelleher and Burger Bob, who were the organizers. Unfortunately, Burger Bob couldn't join us on the trip, but Terry did an excellent job in his absence and kept us all in line and on schedule, which is a big deal over there. And there was lots from this end as well. Melissa McQuaig, thank you for your work in the Facebook and for all the volunteers that work on this. It's been a 38-year relationship, and there was 20 representatives from Collingwood that went this year, including myself and my wife Susie. We landed in Kitano on, they're 14 hours ahead of us, so we arrived 2 days after we left. But we made it up on the way home because we arrived 2 hours before we left. So in Kitano, we stayed with our host families for 5 days and got a real taste for life as a civilian in the city of Kitano, which they consider themselves to be very comparable to Collingwood, and I would too, although their population is about 76,000 comparatively to other municipalities in Tokyo. They are very much like us. They're bounded on all sides of their municipality by ridges and green space and volcanic activity. So it was quite an interesting place to be, and we had some very instructive and interesting meetings with the Mayor Carotto of Catano and his council members, and also the Chamber of Commerce. And we took over as gifts Andrew Payha's print of the Lighthouse, and as well lots of Collingwood Miss, or Canadian Miss Collingwood whiskey, and in particular the double barrel whiskey, which is actually a tribute to the Lighthouse and part of raising the awareness for the campaign. So they were very excited about those gifts and much appreciative. And so thank you to Andrew Payha and the Lighthouse Preservation Society for the donation of the prints, and to Canadian Miss, which also donated the whiskey. And I think we'll be there on this Thursday for the plant tour, or Wednesday, I think it is, for those that are coming. From there we went to Hiroshima, and we were there for Remembrance Day, and that's quite a powerful place to be. So on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the month, we were in front of a monument to a young girl who died many years ago. She was 2 when the bomb was dropped and died of leukemia 10 years later, and she felt that if she could make 1,000 origami cranes, which is the symbol of life in the Japanese culture, that she would be cured. Unfortunately, after making 1,000, she didn't survive, but she has become a lightning rod for the peace movement over there. And so we were there during the time that we were there. There was 2 or 3 school groups that came through to pay tribute, and they have quite a production. They have a school song, and they read out prepared speeches and statements, and they all drop off an origami crane. And every year they empty it, and I'm told there's 10,000 pounds of paper every year they take out of there from cranes. So that was quite a way to celebrate or observe Remembrance Day. From there we went to the Hilcani region, which is very similar to Collingwood. It's a very rural area, and we took trams, or ropeways as they call them, right up over the volcano, and we could see the sulfur spouts coming out from the hillside. And then from there we went to Tokyo, which is a city that has a population of 26+ million in any given weekday, which is about 75% of the population of Canada in a city the size of the GTA. So that's quite something. And it's very interesting to see the mixed use. They have office buildings, residential buildings, commercial buildings, and retail buildings all in the same city block. So it's quite amazing to see the way they integrate that. And while some of the office buildings can be in excess of 20 or 30 stories, most apartment buildings are less than 10. So it's a very interesting mixed use planning exercise over there, and they make it work. We took the subway, which is quite an interesting venture. At least the Shinguyu train station, which we were near, has about 3.5 million passengers go through on a daily basis. And the trains are on time, and they shut. When the doors shut, you don't get in the way. But it was quite something. And I took the train to go to the NSG headquarters, where I met with the CEO and Asian Regional Director. And we had quite a good conversation, and it was an eye-opening experience for me to see how much they value their Canadian operations, which is Pilkington. They bought Pilkington in 2006, and they consider that to be one of their crown jewels of their production, because 51% of their revenue comes from the automotive glass, and that got them into that sector. So they're planning expansion of they're maximizing, I guess, the operations of the Collingwood plant, which is including expansion internally by reorganizing the machinery. They're hiring people, and they are producing highly technical automotive glass with all the sensors, and the autonomous vehicle technology will be a very big challenge for them, and GM is already working on that, and that was one thing I learned through the last mayor's conference down in Oshawa. So they are a very critical part of our employment puzzle, and they're looking at growing, and so it's hope that we will be able to pursue those opportunities moving forward. So we're back home now, and it's great to be here. And in terms of the second item I have is the Mayor's Advisory Committee. There was discussion at the last meeting about that. The committee has been struck. There's 12 individuals on the committee. And in fact, we kicked off the consultation process this morning. So we have a group of 12 who will be working intensively over the next day and a half. And they include Paula Acetola, Anthony Griffiths, Ruth Harbinson, Brandon Houston, Chris Jordan, Dave Maney, Jonathan Schmay, Tony Smith, Andrew Stewart, Shelby Taylor, Foster Williams, and Julian Farley from the ACT Dev Center. And having sat around the room for the introductions, the breadth of experience and knowledge and expertise in that room is mind-boggling. So we look forward to what they will come up with. The CAOI will be back there tomorrow at 1 o'clock to hear the upshot of their proceedings with the consultant, and then we will go out to public consultation as well as some other local stakeholders. And we will be coming back with an economic development action plan in the first quarter of next year. So that's exciting stuff, and we look forward to that. And those are my 2 items, so unless anyone has any questions, we can move on then to the confirmatory bylaw. Who would have that?
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-080, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held November 25th, be enacted and passed this 25th day of November 2019.
Thank you. I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously, and we are looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Jeffrey. We have the motion. All in favor? That's it. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a productive meeting.